of this installation was to emphasize the spontaneity and of repetitive actions embedded in printmaking as a process-driven form of expression. Another aim of the exhibition was to extend the conceptual boundaries of printmaking by using sculptural and installation methods. Some of the wooden mattresses were placed on the floor of the gallery in juxtaposition with prints, and some were installed to lean against the wall. So these are some views of the installation. And here you can see some plates under the prints. Some of the wooden mattresses were placed on the floor of the gallery in juxtaposition with prints, and some were installed to lean against the walls, also using diagonal corners of the gallery. This. I investigated the notion of repetition not as a reproduction of one object, but as a process embodied in nearly all steps of printmaking. Carving blocks and printing was approached as a ritual and potentially spiritual meditative practice. This approach aimed to coalesce Japanese and Western traditions around printmaking and displaying methods, as well as to investigate its phenomenological aspects. And this is one of the views. Oh, okay, can you hear me?
No.
No? Not really?
No.
Why did you say? Okay, I'll try to speak louder.
The mic's not on.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
There's a tech person downstairs. I know it's like,
Okay.
flip the switch. I don't know which one it is. Excuse me.
So, for me, each part of the printmaking process, not only its final end, represents thinking through making is a key concept within my contemporary art practices. This was a critical idea for the presence of absence installation in 2013, in which carved wooden plates were hung asymmetrically in proximity to wood shavings carved from them and installed on the floor. The installation entwined art and craft not as dual but conjoined concept. The display stimulated the audience to explore the process of making as a concept idea of transitive artwork as a network with tenacity to engage with the audience. By creating a carpet of shavings, presence of absence installation pointed towards the idea of impermanence. The wooden shavings had once been plates. One could ask, why not carve until the plate was completely transformed into shavings? But showing transition rather than representing only void better emphasizes the status of change, of being in between, subject to flux. Prints were taken from all the display plates in the exhibition, but were deliberately left out of the exhibition. The idea was to contribute towards the understanding of printmaking, where print itself is absent yet present. So here are some views of that installation.
Is that wood shavings?
Yeah, wood shavings that all come from these prints. Yeah, that was George Fraser Gallery in Auckland, New Zealand. So I took the prints of these plates, but I didn't display them. It was just a testing space in my studio.
Can you speak a little louder
Yeah, I will speak. I'll try.
or slower maybe?
Okay, yeah. So, the creative practice of my doctoral research culminated in my final presentation titled Mindful Repetitions. This was also exhibited in George Fraser Gallery in 2014, Auckland, New Zealand. This exhibition presented two large woodcuts that summed up my entire practice-led doctoral study, a 14.5 meter long print consisting of 18 woodcuts installed on the wall, and there was one 240 centimeters by 320 centimeters long print installed on the floor of the gallery. Prints embodied all the information about the process of making. Rich black ink that, due to the embossing element, came in sharp contrast with the lightness of the paper, was absorbed by prints together with the color of the wood and in some parts the wooden chips. The prints were a result of the countless action of my hand on the block and engaging my whole body mind in creating this artwork. The connections in the final 18 prints are not hidden. There was no intention to be pedantic in carving. I made a decision to print the work in black only, to carve plates directly, which liberated my practice in a way. So here are some views of that installation. And the floor piece that I mentioned before. And then here are some slides of carving the wood. Usually when I work with the large pieces, I always carve on the floor and directly on that wood. That was the last thing I created in New Zealand before leaving. So I installed the wooden stick on the roller because it was easier to apply that way on the floor, and I printed on fabric, all by hand using Baren. And this is how it looked like still in the studio. Over there in the corner there's a garden roller that I tried to use to print, but it didn't really work so well. Baren worked much better. And that is a piece in the gallery, exhibit 10. And then the last exhibition I had in Auckland, New Zealand before leaving was called Dialogues and Evocations in Foguang Shanbei's temple. So I again exhibited a large piece woodcut print on fabric and carved plate on the floor, and some of the prints that I took off the mattresses that were exhibited in Presence of Absence show. And I left the mattress on the floor, the wooden block in the temple. I donated it to them. The nuns really liked it a lot. So now it belongs to them. Oh, here it is, and we are nearly at the end, and I was joking for some more views of that show, and some other use of my other large-scale woodcut prints exhibited in Kerikeri, New Zealand. Just to go through this quickly, and then again I exhibited mindful repetitions in China during the Impact 9 printmaking conference. 2015, that's one view. So since 2015, even though I continued with creating large-scale woodcuts, my practice took another shift. I've moved to Guam. I live on Guam now and teach at the University of Guam. I use Caligo-safe wash non-toxic printing inks, and I print all blocks by hand, rubbing the back of the paper using, so these are some of the new carvings I created over there in my new studio in Guam. Some blocks, prints and blocks. So I started with a cycle of prints. I continue calling the black prints, a work that connects to the notions and themes previously explored through my carvings. Over the past year, however, I again include color in my prints. So these are some views. So I started to include color in my prints again, mixing and combining relief with entirely printmaking methods. These prints involving color serve a topic I have long been interested in, in particular now, when again living in yet another and different part of the world. Through these works, I explore migratory notions of contemporary lifestyle, notions that often grow into travel with no return to the starting point. Usually when we travel, that implies a point of departure, arrival to the point where we are going to, and then return to the starting point, home. My work is expressing such traveling through which the homecoming has perhaps became less possible and even not necessary, maybe. By utilizing a hybridity of methods, my prints echo life that is unfolding through an existence in a world where home is but a transitory place. Relocation, migration, dislocation brings multiple transformative aspects to my practice as well as life. So, I will conclude this presentation with Louis Kamnitzer's thought that informed my thinking around the practice. Making prints is a task. Art seems to be a miraculous byproduct. He emphasized a way of thinking through processes of making while using printmaking techniques to realize conceptual objectives. How to reclaim printmaking as means and not as a goal in itself, he asked in 2010. And more importantly, how to make visible the various forms of print that are at the core of contemporary artistic practice. And how to make moku-hanga and woodcut printmaking visible as part of contemporary art in 21st century. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Just a technical question.
Yeah.
Some of the work that's on paper, I believe, how are you installing it? How are you adhering that to the walls? Like magnet or skin?
You mean like the installations?
Yeah, or like a taste, or, how are you putting that flat to the wall?
Well, for this particular installation, I used Velcro tape.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's okay, that's what
So I put a bookbinding tape first on the back of my print because it's easier to peel it off with the water without damaging paper too much. And then on this I put Velcro tape. I don't put it directly on the paper because that would damage the print. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. I did. I learned to make paper. I stayed there for 3 months and learned Japanese method of paper making. And yeah. So that's that thing that I created in my first print installation. I didn't make that paper. This paper is really thin and it's really difficult to make. It's a roll of paper they use for calligraphy usually, and I use for woodcut printmaking to create this installation. Any other questions?
Quick question. You're from Croatia originally?
Yes.
From Zagreb or Split? Or?
No. My hometown is called Karlovac. It's some 40 kilometers from Zagreb.
Okay. Is there much printmaking going on there in Zagreb?
Yes, that's where I did my undergraduate studies at the Academy of Fine Arts in Zagreb.
Okay.
I was just talking about that in the beginning.
I missed the beginning.
Once again?
I missed the early part of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I graduated in 2002 from the Academy of Fine Arts in Zagreb. I did printmaking there and learned Western printmaking methods. Then I went to Japan to participate in the artist residency project. Where I learned paper making and got in touch with Eastern aesthetics and deepen my interest in woodcut printmaking in particular. After which I went to Tokyo, University of the Arts to do my master's between 2002 and 2005. These are some masters that from time to time came to our studio at Tokyo Gedai to show, to demonstrate ukiyo-e methods. I studied with Professor Noda Tetsuya
Right.
at Tokyo Geidai. So
All right.
I'm just quickly going. So that's the piece that I did there in moku-hanga. The work I graduated with. And then in Korea after that, I sort of like tailored and took the knowledge that from Tokyo Geidai to sort of like continue with my idea of creating print installations and detaching the printmaking from the walls. So I created that outdoor installation with prints on fabric. It looks like a flag. Some moku-hanga I did later on, and then throughout my doctoral studies I really extended the scale of my work and decided to print monochrome. This is a moku-hanga installations all printed by hand. I use my blocks also as part of the installation.
Yeah, I was also wondering what, I saw this before, what
Yeah.
kind of wood is this?
Yeah.
Is it-
That's a plywood, Shina plywood.
veneer,
Yeah, I could get really good wood in New Zealand, but
Yeah.
now that I live on Guam, it's a little bit difficult to get all the materials. I have to import everything.
I know this thing.
Yeah. So, presence of absence, I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, that's okay.
So any other questions? Yes.
What type of paint are you using?
So for all the moku-hanga prints, like the unlimited resonance of repetition, I used sumi ink.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah. So sumi ink for all this prints, and then, but later on, in my mindful repetitions, I combined really Eastern and Western methods of printmaking, sort of embraced though the heritage that I have with the knowledge that I attained on my way. So I use, because I'm interested in non-toxic printmaking and ecologically informed practices, so I use calico safe wash inks, and these were all printed by press.
Oh, they
But I was talking how abandoned edition making and more focused on printmaking practice, woodcut carving as a sort of spiritual meditative practice, and abandoned creating and just directly cutting in the wood and immersing in that repetition of the movements and of my hand and my body on the.
How large are these?
So this installation is 14 by 5 meters long.
No, but the individual pieces.
Individual piece, there are 18 prints.
Right.
One print is 80 centimeters by 120 centimeters. That was the size of the press I had. Press bed. So, and I use BFK paper for this installation, not Japanese hand paper, like I did in my first installation. So, yeah, sort of like doing different things, printing on fabric as well, but using yarn to print. Any other questions?
Is that with the roll or is that sumi?
No, that's also calico safe wash, not toxic.
Ah, so it's a
Relief printing
bit,
ink.
bit thicker.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted really sort of darker black ink.
You need that on the surface, so if it's too
Yeah.
big, it's just going to run.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. Further questions? Or okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.